Hey everybody. So we're in FL Studio 20 here, and I'm going to show you how to stay organized when making beats. So the first thing is naming and coloring patterns as you're going. So as you can see, all my patterns are named and colored here. So it's very easy to visually see what's what. The way I do that is as I'm making a new pattern, I will make the new pattern and I'll name it right away. So I'll call this blue base number 2. Name color. I'll change the color to gray, the same color as my original boo base, which is right here. And then I will put it in the playlist, and I'll make sure to put it in its own playlist track so that it's a lot easier to see everything if everything's separated on different tracks here. Then I have my first bass line here, and my second bass line here, and then my first piano here, second piano here. And instead of if in the situation where you can where you're making a second version of something like this boo bass, the original one, it's easier if you just highlight it and then hold shift and then click it, and then you can drag a copy of it out. Take the copy, click this little button in the top left corner, and then click make unique, and then that literally just adds another number behind the original name, boo bass number 3, and that way you keep the color of it, and you keep the name very organized, and you can just open it up and then make whatever changes it is that you want to make to it. So that is a very important step to staying organized while making beats, and it's always best to do these things as you're going instead of waiting till the end or waiting till halfway through and then having to do all the work to go back through a really disorganized mess and try to organize everything. That's no fun. It's definitely worth taking the extra few minutes while you're doing it to organize. You'll thank yourself later for sure. Okay, and number 2 is naming and coloring plugins in the channel rack. So I'm here in the channel rack, and I'll open up a new plugin. I'll use Nexus, and then I'll go to bass, grab a bass, basic sign, and then I'll rename and color. I'll name this basic sign, because if I just leave it as Nexus, then later on, once I have like 5 different plugins, Nexus plugins open, and they're all different instruments, I won't be able to tell the difference between any of them because they're not named. And I'll add the color because it makes everything a whole lot easier just to notice the color when taking a quick glance at it. You'll notice the color sooner than reading the words. So now I got my basic sign there, and it's really important also to always name your patterns right here. Name your patterns the same thing as the plugin, as what the plugin or the sample. Unless it's your drums, I always put all my drums together in one in one pattern. But for all the other instruments, I always make sure that it's one. I always make sure that it's one plugin to a pattern. I don't ever stack different plugins into one pattern. Like, for example, I'll show you, if I were to have my boo bass here, and then let's say I would have another set of notes here in my Hollywood brass, I would take this and I would make a separate pattern for that set of notes, and I'll call it Hollywood brass. And then I'll color it purple because that's the color of the plugin. Paste it there. So I got that there now. So naming and coloring plugins in the channel rack is extremely important because it makes it much easier to see what you have here and not getting things mixed up and confused. So 3 is grouping plugins and samples in the channel rack. So how you organize your channel rack, like I have here, I have my drums and then I have my instruments, and then they have an unsorted section. So I don't have my basic sign one grouped here, but if you want to highlight them all and create a group for them all, you just double click the top that highlights them all, or you can click and drag, and that just highlights some of them. So I'll highlight those and then click this down arrow in the top left corner, and then you go to group selected, and then you type in whatever name you want to call that group. I already did that, and then it'll show up right there. It'll be grouped. So I'm gonna add my basic sign to my instruments group, and now it's part of this group. So 4 is grouping and organizing patterns in the playlist. So as you can see here, I have my drum pattern 1 on one track, and I have my ballad grand piano on another track, but I have another ballad grand piano that I am layering over top of this other ballad grand piano, and I have that in a separate track. If I have, for each and every different pattern that I have, I always put each different pattern on a different playlist track here. That way, like for example, that should be down there, for example. Then later on, once I have a whole song and a bunch of different patterns, then it's much easier for me to just look here and then see which pattern it is I'm looking for, and then I can just look horizontally to find it, and and it makes it a whole lot easier to name each of these tracks, because you can literally just right click and then auto name, and then it just names it whatever pattern you have on that track. And if you have multiple different patterns on the same track, then you literally can't do that, and then you can't organize your playlist quite as well, and it gets very confusing. So number 5 is making sure to properly name and color mixer tracks. This is also very important, and really delete this. Really all the other tips that I've told you already, they all kind of work together to organize everything else. And I'll show you, for example, like in here, I have named all of these, and if you want to send all your channels here to the mixer, then you can just double click the top square here. It highlights them all, and then you click this little arrow, and then you go down to assign to free mixer tracks. You click that, and then it sends them all to your mixer like this. And it's nice and organized, and all the colors translate over, the names translate over. It's very easy to see what's what once you're mixing later. It makes it way easier for you. And if you have a separate one, like this basic sign here, like this bottom one, if you have a separate one that isn't already assigned to a mixer track and the rest are, then you can just open it up. And then for third-party plugins, you always got to click the plugin first, otherwise it won't work. But yeah, you make sure you do that, and then you hit Control L, and then that sends that channel to the mixer. So then you can very easily see everything in the mixer. Next, I will be showing you how to add separators to your mixer to separate different instruments from other ones. Like, for example, my drums here, I'll add a separator here. You right click separator, and then that puts a separator to the left of the instrument that you right clicked on. So that puts a separator here between the drums and the rest of the instruments. And I have my two instruments here and my two bass instruments here. And I'll separate those as well. So I'll right click on Boo Bass and then click separator, creates a separator right there. So they're all separated nicely, and I know my basses are here, instruments here, and drums are here. And if you want to remove a separator, then you can just right click again and then click separator again, and it'll remove it. You can also highlight and then create group. You can call group whatever you want, bass, and then that puts a separator on both sides of the ones you highlighted, which is a nice little trick. And you can also highlight, and then you can auto color group, and then that it just auto colors the group, obviously. So as you can see, this project is a whole lot more fun to work on when everything is nice and clean and nice and organized the way it is. So if these tips helped you, then definitely make sure to smash that like button. And if you want to keep getting helpful videos like this, then make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell to get notified. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace.